So welcome to this session on Africa Rising. Africa, is it the natural resource capital of the world? A very exciting discussion that I have been looking forward to have, and the presentation from Mr. N.J. Ayuk, who is the founder and CEO of the Pan-African corporate law conglomerate firm, Centurion Law Group. And he's the founder and executive chairman of the African Energy Chamber. He's the author of Billions at Play, The Future of an African Energy and Doing Deals, and co-author of Big Barrels, African Oil and Gas and the Quest for Prosperity. He is recognized as one of the foremost figures in African business today, a global shaper with the World Economic Forum, one of the Forbes top 10 most influential men in Africa in 2015, and a well-known deal maker in the petroleum and power sectors. NJ is dedicating his career to helping entrepreneurs find success and to building the careers of young African lawyers. NJ strives through his work to ensure that business, and especially oil and gas, impacts African societies in a positive way and drives local content development. NJ graduated from the University of Maryland College Park and earned a Juris Doctor from William Mitchell College of Law and an MBA from the New York Institute of Technology. We are really honored to welcome you here, NJ. And I'll give it over for you. I know you have a presentation. Did you want to share screen? Did you want to share screen or?
No, it would be a discussion. So,
all right.
Margaret, I could tell you where if the good Lord calls me first, I would have you do my funeral. That was a great redemption of my life, but thank you so much for having me. And I think what you are doing, it's really taking law and what we do as lawyers to a different level. I remember going to law school, and one of the most important lessons I learned, it's always that story from Charles Hamilton Houston, one of the foremost civil rights lawyers in the United States, that actually trained Thurgood Marshall and many others that came after him. Said a lawyer is either a social parasite or a social engineer. And that stuck in me, and decided that what are we going to do with our legal careers? What are we going to do? Whether we are in the forefront pursuing justice, defending liberty, but how do we use our legal careers to serve those that need burdens and barriers lifted sometimes, those that even when we have record prosperity are left on the roadside. And when you look at it, you couldn't, as God would sometimes get life to bring you somewhere, you end up back home in Africa. And you start looking at our continent and saying, what is that future that we as lawyers have really create? And I then start looking at Africa's problems and solutions. And it was born out of natural resources, whether it is land, water is oil, gas, mining. Most of the wars, the Congo, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Angola, everything was connected to natural resources. And that story and that lesson from Charles Hamilton Houston stuck with me and said, how do we make that choice to just go out there and pursue that naked ambition that means nothing to so many that have paved the way, those that came before us and those that really opened doors for us to become, and now we are challenged to do something bigger than our own personal interests. And that is what is going to shape us. Now let's talk about Africa. It's not a country. It is a continent of 54 countries. If some people say 54 states, I still believe that it's sovereign. But this continent has seen its spikes, whether it is with natural resources, whether it is with the resource curves, but also has to challenge itself, how it's going to shape its future, and how natural resources are really going to shape how we really impact people. In an era where we look at climate change, which it's real, in an era where we look at global warming, which is real. Some people say they're different, they're not the same. I think they're the same. We also have to look at what Africa in the global fair is. How we are going to, when we talk about future law, how we're going to use our legal skills to really build on how we lawyers can really change that. Do we look at the justified call for us in Africa to say, and using your natural resources? Because if you use your natural resources, whether it's coal or oil or gas, it is going to impact Western nations who at this stage the world developed, and they don't have to, you don't need that. Climate change is real, but energy poverty is also real. I'll give an example. If you go into the Gambia, and I was in the Gambia last year, many young women would tell you, I lost my baby during a cesarean section. You know why? Because the lights went off. The lights went off at night. Many of those stories you hear day in, day out. The continent that is going to be 1.2 billion, 800 million people don't have any access to any kind of power. And when we look at it, we have different challenges. And we have lawyers. We cannot be stuck by dogma. We cannot be stuck by our notion of that. We have to stick by some different kind of idea, because if we don't change the way how we practice, if we don't change the way how we use our natural resources to empower our people, to beat the resource curse, to open doors for people like women, whom in our continent, we have to be honest, and that's something which most men wouldn't talk about. Most women in our continent are still the last hired and the first fired. They have not taken their true place in what our continent has to offer, especially with our natural resources, but also with the legal environment when it comes to judges. But right now in a post-COVID environment, we're looking at our jurisdictions and how we have to play and what we have to go. Looking at something which in my other job as with Centurion, we've worked on the lawyer on demand mechanism. And we realize that most African lawyers who are well-trained, well-educated, dedicated, happen to be women, but then they have to fight that choice, that fighting choice of saying, I'm going to stay home and raise a family, or pregnancy is a disease and I'm going to be out of work. That calls for us changing that. So in Africa today, we're witnessing a seismic change where leadership is going to have to take clear, conscious decision. But our generation cannot wait, because we cannot be the statistics of the past. We cannot be the statistics where people say, there they go again. There they go again with their mismanagement. There they go again with the lack of transparency. There they go again with their resource curves, but it can't for us to change it. We can change the world, we can feed the world, but we also have learned something. I had a man from Trinidad Tobago whom I love to fight him a little bit, but he taught me. I always call him my quiet teacher when it comes to gas. And there was a story he told me many years ago, I think about 7 or 8 years ago. He said, you know, NJ, if Africa should have found oil and gas, I thought they should have found gas first before oil. I looked at this man, I thought, you're crazy, because everybody I saw around me was making money from oil. But then he went further and he explained how gas can really change, could have changed our dynamics in the continent, whether it comes to creating jobs, he created story. He even told me in Trinidad and Tobago, this man, Eric Williams, not the prime minister, but the minister. I think the prime minister will be very happy to have him named after him. But this man, Eric Williams, told me one thing. If you use your gas, you could have built energy industries, urea, ammonia, NPK, petrochemical plants, which those petrochemicals would then feed your people, will then power your continent and provide life, would then create an environment where you could have a lot of other jobs for other people. And he challenged me. He said, as a lawyer, that is what you need to use your legal skills to drive that change across the continent, to drive that change that people do see how you can use these resources to develop. And I tell you this, that mission, that requirement has shaped what we do today, whether it comes into gas monetization, using gas to guide us, but also knowing that we have a duty to do something bigger than our own personal interest. Because when the lights are off, there is so many expect more from us, and we got to do something that our continent and everybody has to see. And we as lawyers, we are called to do justice. We are empowered to change the way our society works. And Africa now more than ever requires that of us. And no matter where you are, and you know, I close with this. Climate change is real. The world is dealing with something. But sometimes I could be very stubborn to say, we in Africa didn't cause climate change. We have polluted maybe just 2 times when compared to Europe and the Western countries polluting more than us. But we all have an obligation because this is a collective issue. But you're not going to move from oil to green to whether it is renewables or whether you're talking wind or solar. You're going to have to go a transition. And now more than ever, poor people need us to stand with them during this transition, to make sure they're not left behind, to make sure they're empowered, to make sure we can use gas to help them transition, to create jobs and everything. Because if our legal skills are not used to empower people, then we are failing on our obligation to change the world. Most of us went into this to really change the world and inspire others to make that difference. So I'm so happy to be here to join you in making that difference. And I am reporting for duty. And thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for letting me be part of this, because thinking about the future, you are paving a way and being that catalyst that is really going to shape, that it give a kid like me, whom nobody ever thought. I was a little troublemaker. Nobody ever thought that I'm going to be sitting in the rooms with kings and queens and presidents. But then I could end up sitting with Margaret. I have arrived, Margaret. I have arrived. So thank you so much.
Yeah, Angie,
everybody.
I see you're a comedian as well. But that was an incredibly powerful speech that you've just given us, Angie, and and inspiring. And I want to go a little bit with you on this issue, which I tend to call it the elephant in the room, that Africa, that continent, houses countries that are the richest in the world from a resource perspective, but yet have some of the poorest people on the planet. That elephant in the room that is the center of what our global experience. Where do you see, what's your perspective on how we got there and the steps that we need to take to no longer be there? What's your perspective on that? Is it the rhetoric that, the leaders are corrupt and incompetent and mismanaged? Is it a rhetoric or a commentary that there's corporate exploitation and in the extractive industries and all of that? What is your perspective as the chairman of the African Energy Chamber?
That's a great question. I do think everything, you can't just say everything fits the puzzle, but I don't want to get in the blame games to say whether the leaders are corrupt or there's mismanagement or anything. How did we get here? We got here by basically having and uneducated leadership that understood that collective rent, the international company comes, they rent our resources, they pay us rent, and they do whatever they want. And also, we never ever felt that we have an obligation, like somebody taught me, to put skin in the game, to be part of it, but also define what we want and let people fit within that our own definition. Because if your mind is in the wrong place, your behind is going to follow your mind to the wrong place. And that's what happened with us. And then we got caught up in political differences. And there was a Cold War. We started, we started worrying about whether we communists or we socialists or whatever, capitalists. And we didn't focus on using these resources to change and empower the lives of our people. Then we let a group of corporate elites whom, I always say big corporate, they're like predators. They see an opportunity, they pounce. And we forgot that. And when you go asleep, and you got somebody knocking at the door ready to exploit and ready to drive that is the problem. But then I think our generation today, when we see what is happening, we got to change that. If we get confused and get worried by the tactics on how we change that, then that becomes the problem. Now we got to start looking at ourselves and saying, what do we do from here? Local content. How do we make sure that Africans are part of the value change everywhere? The past fights on whether you want to blame who or not blame who, done. It's gone. The past is reference, not residence. But what about economic justice? Making sure that you could have more people in the game, creating a pathway to ensure that we educate people, because you know what? Education is going to be the next big struggle to really get people in so we can create more jobs, because I refuse to believe that you can't have Africans working on platforms. You can have Africans creating new businesses, and you can have the next Facebook or Twitter or anything coming out of this continent. You need to create that, but also we need to hold ourselves accountable. Somebody must be responsible being down, but you're not responsible for you not getting back up. Somebody once told me, I used to practice boxing when I was a kid in college. And I had a friend, he came back, he said, "Hey man, I saw you got knocked down." I said, "No, you didn't see me get knocked down. You either saw me getting up or standing up." It's our job to get up and stand up and correct what we see, and that is where we have to go. And it's okay to talk about what happened in the past, but I want to look at the future, and that's why we get this forum. Future. Yeah, it's not enough for us Africans and those who care about Africa around the world. It's not enough to be complacent. What I see around with a lot of young people, we get with our hashtag generation, which is good. And we just say, well, NJ, we mirror images. We just a reflection of what we see. We do the same thing like the big corporates did. We do the same thing like the past leaders of the old did. We are mirror images. But you know what, Margaret? I get up every morning. I use a mirror every morning. But mirrors are to correct what you see, not reflect what you see. And I think that generation has to put in place those corrective measures. And those of us who have been able to get some of the best education that most people have not, most of us that we've been able to, we stand on shoulders of giants. We drink wells that we never drilled. We palaces that our fathers could never walk in. But then it doesn't mean that we need to get into those palaces and those houses and come back and just tweet and hashtag and say, look at me, look at Big Ben, or look at me at the Champs-Élysées in Paris. It's about changing that culture and having a counterculture that brings in the vision of the Kwame Nkrumah and W.E. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey into our development that says, we can rise and you can get up and move things, because when we stand, And when our people stand, we create a pathway to making sure that we get justice. And I went to Sunday school, but they told me something in Sunday school that justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. But it can never happen unless we start paving that path for it to happen.
NJ, God, yeah, you're truly an inspiring orator for the continent. And I thank you for that. We only have a few more minutes, so I do want to get more questions to you, because I really think that there are some important discussions that I would like to have with you. You know, as the executive chairman of the African Energy Chamber, I love what you said about the past being there for reference, but not for residence, not to take up residence. What is the vision? How does the African Energy Chamber steer the vision for the content of Africa in respect of how you use fossil fuels? The rest of the world is, on the road to divestment at varying and different levels. What is your position? What needs to happen? And what are you all doing in that respect?
When I was a kid, I learned ABC. Climate, going into renewables is C, oil is A, gas is B. You are going to go, Africa cannot go from oil to renewables. Africa has to transition. We have to go from oil to gas to renewables, but we got to be careful. We have to be very careful. When you look at wind, solar, there was a lot of sun in Africa when Europe and America was using oil. They knew there was sun, but they didn't build wind. They didn't build renewables. Who is going to own the patents and the copyrights? So one of the key things we Africans are more worried is that we don't want someone in Europe or any of the Western country turn on or turn off the switch on us. We have to be part of that new energy. But also, how do we get there? How there is gas. You use your gas to create what Eric Williams taught me, those energy industries. If you have fertilizer, we don't feed our people, so we don't have to run to Western nations and beg for aid, because if we rely on aid, it does not help us. Almost $700 billion has been given to Africa in aid. You know what it has done? It kept us lazy. We don't want that. We want to create more opportunity than relying on aid. So you need a transition. When you have that transition, gas is a cleaner form of fossil fuels that is going to transition us. And we're not against wind, solar. It is very, very welcome. But we have to make sure my grandma in the village shouldn't just have enough electricity to charge her cell phone. She needs to have sustainable electricity so her grandchildren can stay next to her and they can get jobs in their local communities, because it's something we don't look at around what's going on in Africa. African cities are overcrowded. African cities are going to expand. African cities are going to be filled with demand. And you want to talk about climate change? If you let people have mass migration in the cities without sustainable power, then you have a problem. Then you're going to have more pollution. You're going to have more crime. So while people in Europe and America look at it as some fanfare, some hashtag game, for us it's real. For us it's real. Imagine a world where you can sit in London or Frankfurt or Paris, and you can go 5 days without being able to use your cell phone, or either turn it on or turn it off. Imagine you not being able, you're talking about electric cars. We don't even have electricity, so how do we talk about electric cars? So we need to transition into this new technology. We need to transition into this new form of energy, and we can make sure that in this process, we as Africans and everybody, we have to be part of it to make sure that we are not lost out and we are not being held back by another form of colonialism, that these resources become colonized and we become consumers. We need to become suppliers so that we can have our rightful authority and make the world respect our people.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm looking at the time and it's a pity we did not have a 45-minute slot here for you, Andrew, because I really wanted to discuss around the policy frameworks that exist right now that support things like transfer pricing, which is having a really deleterious effect on the economies in Africa, to talk about trade liberalization policies and how that is impacting what is happening in Africa as well. One of the things we are trying to do in this summit over the 5 days is map from the speakers who are coming here, the policy interventions. We don't have time to get into it deeply at all, but maybe if I could just ask you one last question. We also don't really have time to take questions from others. I can ask the tech, is someone up next in this room right now?
We have a few minutes in between.
We can continue just for, can we, NJ, continue just a few minutes with you? Thank you. How many minutes do we have, Leslie?
The next
I can't leave. I don't want to get in trouble with you, Margaret. So I got to
15 minutes.
Yeah, sorry. Leslie, what did you say? Sorry?
We have 15 minutes before the
you.
next session begins.
Oh, look at that. Can you give me 15 more minutes, NJ? That's incredible. Thank you, because we're really trying to identify the areas for policy reform. We may not be able to do very deeply here in this conversation, but we're hoping we can work with you after to identify those areas that we can begin advocating for. But what is the situation with transfer pricing across the continent and how it's working with the multinational corporations right now?
Well, it has killed the continent. You know, I mean, there's no question about it. It has killed the continent. Take, for example, every multinational corporation would use transfer pricing in and this is not just the energy sector. It is big in the energy sector in every kind of concessions they have. And they use the best tax shelters in the world. And so what happens is, if you are a US corporation or a British corporation, you would end up not paying taxes in the UK or the United States. You would end up still not paying taxes in Africa. So you have basically, because of transfer pricing, you have doubled or tripled or quadrupled your profits. But locally, of course, you're not going to report profits. And I think these are things where we need to have a policy framework against that, because the truth of the matter is that I don't believe that without transfer pricing, you are not going to be profitable as a company. If you are not going to be profitable as a company because you can't cheat, then you shouldn't be in business, because business has to be about getting fair returns. You got to also be equitable. But when you go, you got to even go further than that. Flight capital. Where do we stand today with the African continent with flight capital? That is something that we got to really deal with. Illicit transfer of funds from the continent into tax shelters and tax havens that has basically brought down African banking institutions and really made it difficult to have money circulating around the continent. Right now, we are in a position where we have the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. Because of COVID, it wasn't implemented as it had to be this year. We hope that next year they are going to move with a fast track implementation strategy. That fast track implementation strategy could really do us some progress. What does it benefit? You're going to have a 1.2 billion free trade market. That's the largest free trade market in the world. But now it depends on how we implement it. It depends on how we manage it. And it depends on how we really bring policies to bear. And I also give you this. You're talking about policies. We need to hold ourselves accountable. We must. You can't fly from one African country to another. For most countries, you need a visa. I get somebody leave from the United States or Europe, can fly into more countries in Africa to do business or tourism or anything. But we in Africa can't do that. So we need to scrap these visa states which have thought we are going to be restrictive and we are not going to open our borders. And when they opened, they realized there was no migration. You know, people trying to go somewhere, you know. So opening up the borders, getting goods and services to move within Africa, setting up policies that would create an environment that builds that infrastructure, it would really benefit everyday people. And we need to stop looking at this from the lenses of big corporations. We should look at this from the lens of my grandmother who just ran a small business but couldn't get stuff going. We should look at it from the lenses of my mother who was a teacher but couldn't get stuff moving because every time she tried to make one step, she gets asked a bribe to even start a business or run a business or even fulfill her goals, even though she had the skills. When you start looking at policies that drive those people, then you start knowing that you're building from bottom up. And then that would translate into building consumer corporate confidence for us to really drive it. And I think that, so there is, Margaret, there is a big requirement on both sides. I don't want to say it's just the big corporations, but we're also facing pressure from the World Bank and the IMF and the IFC. But don't worry, the change today when you see the World Bank and the IMF with the IFC, it's not about having some guy, some European or American show up. No, now they got brothers and sisters showing up, speaking that language because they have a PhD from some fancy university in London or the United States. I wouldn't mention their names. I don't want to get in trouble. But those fancy PhDs have not really helped us because they come in with those PhDs and tell us structural adjustment programs, and you got to do this and you got to do this. And every time they've done that, we have failed. So you need to look at these policies that is imposed on us and who it benefits and who it doesn't benefit. So for me, and I'll be honest, and I might get in trouble after this, we need more PhDs and less PhDs. You know, these PhDs are doing something. These PhDs are driving something. These PhDs are really the breadwinners, and they're really driving that. These PhDs have not really helped us because they have actually joined the IMF and the World Bank and really put us in a tight corner. And at the end of the day, what do? We have to listen to it because we've mismanaged our economies. And when we've mismanaged our economies, we have no chance but to ask for a bailout. So this is time when I think we need to look at these policies, but we have not been properly served by these big multinational institutions. We've not been properly served by the big aid agencies. And until we turn that around, we are not really going to see and have policy that is people-driven, that is about, it has to be about people. And build those policies for small businesses. And then you would see, because we need to move small businesses to big businesses because the big corporations don't want to become small businesses. So let's build for small businesses so that we can get big business, they can become bigger and better. Look at the Chinese, they built something and now we envy of them. But today the red dragon is basically going to swim us. And we need to really watch that as well in the content, how our relationship with China, how we go on these resource drives with China, how we negotiate these agreements with China, how we really reshape our interactions and the value system, and how we make sure that people are a big part of this. For example, local content. There's no reason why you can't have our people working in the Chinese constructions and buildings. Why do I have to get 300-500 Chinese people on the side and just 4 or 5 Africans? You know, don't make no sense to me. You know, so we need to shape those policies that really guide us. And if we can't do that, then I think we are going to see a more bleaker future. But I am very, very bullish and optimistic with this generation of Africans. they don't have appetite for nonsense like the past. And you're going to see a seismic change in really happening with our relations. And yes, we might face some difficulties, but I think we are seeing policies that is really going to really impact. And I think the old guard is getting away, and they are also, some of them who are smart are getting to the table. But you know, I always believe you got to be on the table. And our generation is not ready to not be on the table, because if you can't, you know, Mama always said, if you can't be on the table, you're going to be on the menu. And I don't want to be on the menu, because when you're on the menu, you're getting chopped.
As a very hopeful and inspiring presentation, NG. Again, I'm looking at the time, but I would like to acknowledge Makeda in the house. Hi, Makeda. Is there anyone who would like to ask questions of NJ? I don't want to hog all the time with him. No questions. Ooh, so one final one for you before we go, even though this is technical, and should I go into a technical topic? But you seemed very in favor of the African Free Trade Agreement, and thinking that this will definitely, you know, be future forward-looking and progressive. But without the African infrastructure at a governance level, do you not see the challenges that might provide, having the free trade agreement, but not having a governance infrastructure that's coherent across the continent? Also challenges, I've read of persons talking about challenges with respect to digitization across the continent in terms of the identification of people on the continent, and you know, some of the challenges that might bring to bear if we go fully into that AFT. Any final thoughts on that?
Yes, yeah, you're right. The challenges are there. The challenges will continue to be there. We need to improve the governance structure. You know, the way of the past no longer holds. But I also believe that without it's better to be ready and not have an opportunity than to have an opportunity and not be ready. We need, this agreement sets the stage. It's like a clarion call telling us, get to work. You know, it is not going to mean anything if we don't work on the implementation, the execution of the free trade agreement. But then there are some rules in place that can give people the power to challenge these governance structures and the corporate structure, so that we can really create, we can really create a platform and also a policy framework that really works. Those countries that are going to move and engage in a fast-track basis to implement it, they are going to see more investment coming to their country. They are going to see their doing business rankings going up. They are going to see a lot more trade come in. So the benefits when you open up, the benefits when you, today people want a more, you know, it's not just a free market, but a free and structured market and an enabling environment. It's even more important. And I think that, we can't say, let's not do it till we'll get all the pieces in place, because there's always going to be somebody that is going to hold you back. But we need to prepare ourselves to meet that challenge. Integration without preparation is frustration. That's why I believe that we need to drive education more. We need to train these bureaucrats. You know, you can't make them do everything, but we need to get these programs. And I think this is where you really have to get, where we need to tap into. Look at the Caribbeans. They've not gotten it 100% perfect, but they've made progress. So one of the things which I advise the African Union is to look at what the Caribbean nations have done. Go there and learn from them. how do we able, the CARICOM was able to put some of the free trade and even that, and sometimes even speak out against one another when they try to attack or do anything that affects their democratic governance institutions. You know, don't only look at their success, but also look at their mistakes. You know, when I was a kid, I always look at my senior brother. That's what made me sometimes not get in trouble, because I just watch him. Every time he got in trouble, mama whooped him. And I always say my grandma didn't biology or zoology, but she knew psychology and slapology. And one of those slaps had to work. So I look at him getting in trouble and I look at his mistakes and I say, okay, I better stay away from that because this is stick or a slap gonna come. So we need to look at other African nations in the diaspora, like the Caribbean that have done it. We need to even look at our Asian brothers, learn from their mistakes or not only from their success. If you do that, you would be able to implement it, but also political will. Every leader needs to establish that vision and say, this is what we want to drive with free trade and fair trade among Africans. Because why do I have to worry about Europe with 300 million people? I got 1.2 billion people at home. Why can't I trade with myself? This is a 1.2 billion market. If you trade with yourself, you make more and you get more, because you're laying out the infrastructure to do that. Why do I have to worry about my brothers and sisters running around being in the streets of Paris or London and getting called less than or all the names? When I have 1.2 billion people, I can get my goods and services around and I could make it. So you then be able to shape the world. So there is hope, but it doesn't mean anything. You know, I'll leave you with this. Dr. King always said the path to a moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. It doesn't bend by itself. It's people like you and me and everyone here that help us shape it. So we got to shape it. We got to bend it that way. And I always believe that there is that righteous wind in our back, that if we believe in this continent, we believe in the change that needs to be done, we can shape it. And we can get more young people like the ones I taught that don't have lights in their village, that they can be able to have something beautiful coming out of there. Because in our people, every day when I look at them, I see beauty. And if we don't bring that beauty out and we don't let that light shine, then we are still going to face the problems of tomorrow. So thank you so much for this.
And Jay, Ayuk, thank you so much for this brilliant presentation today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor. Thank you so much.
The Future Law Institute looks forward to working with the African Energy Chamber and the Centurion Law Group, mapping these policies that could really assist the progress and escalate the progress on the continent of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless.
God bless.
Thank you for having me.